I decided that in all this free time, I would make a video with Jake about how to make my favorite scones. I set everything up before we started the video, and I always like to organize it when I'm making the scones because there's a lot of different ingredients that go with it. For this recipe, you can make any kind of scone. The recipe I follow is called like Magpie Kitchen or something. I'll have Jake link it. I usually do blueberries. Last time I made it, I did half blueberry, half chocolate chip scones, which is what I'm gonna do today. First, I'll go over all the different ingredients you need. So we need 4 cups of flour for this. You can sift it, you don't have to because we whisk it out later. A cup of butter, which we'll get to later. And then it says about a cup of toppings. I've got 3/4 of a cup of both of those since I'm doing half chocolate chip, half blueberry. The more, the merrier. A cup of sour cream, a cup of sugar, 1 egg, and then you need a teaspoon of baking soda and salt and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. This recipe actually calls for the baking soda and baking powder, so don't get confused. Normally cookies or cake recipes only call for one or the other, but this is a pastry and it wants both. So the very first step for this is your cup of sour cream. You want to measure it out individually and put it in a bowl that's larger than 1 cup. So you can see in this, I have room for the sour cream to expand. When I add the baking soda, you want to stir it in and then there's a chemical reaction and it expands. Teaspoon baking soda. And then you just stir it in. I just use a regular spoon and you want to get it in really well. And then we'll just leave it sitting here and we can look at it in a few minutes and we'll notice that it poofed up. Okay, so the next step after that is just adding our flour to our mixer. I use a KitchenAid blender, you don't have to. And this is the first thing that we will start combining. So I'm adding in the flour. I'm just using the spoon to make sure that I get all the flour from the bowl, and so I can scrape it from the edges. I like to add it before I put my little mixer head on, just so that I can hold the whole bowl over the opening, but you don't have to do that. Now I'm gonna use the whisk for this part, just so that it can sift the flour a little more. You don't have to, but it helps to sift. Next we have our cup of sugar. We're just gonna pour it right in on top of the flour. And the last thing we're gonna add before mixing is our baking powder. We need 2 teaspoons of the baking powder. And once it's combined, we just mix it. You can put it on low or medium. So once it looks all fluffy and sifted, you can remove your head. And this is the part where we add the butter. Now, the recipe calls for a pastry blender to help slice up the butter, but I do not have a pastry blender, and the recipe I'm following, that woman also doesn't have one, and she uses a cheese grater, and it actually works really well. So we use a combination of a cheese grater and then just knives, any sharp knives you have, and I'll show you how you cut in the butter. This part can get a little bit messy, but just go with it. I like to pull down the wrapper so that I have something to hold on to and I'm not squeezing the butter. And you literally just grate the butter. And you want to make sure you've left the butter out for a while so it's softened. It makes it easier.
I'll show you what it looks like when it's in the bowl after that is my first stick. It gets really messy at the end. You want to be careful at the end that you don't hit your fingers on the grater.
And then I normally just kind of plop in the last little chunk. And you can see what it looks like in the bowl and shake out what you have left in this butter. Now I'll do the next stick and then I'll show you how to knife them together to blend them in even more. Okay, so once you grate in both sticks of butter, you're gonna have, it looks kind of like noodles, And I just use the 2 knives, and you just want to cut the butter literally as much as you can and fold it into the flour mixture. And you want to do it until like your hands are aching and you literally can't cut it in anymore. I usually I'll kind of chop with one and then I'll crisscross. There's not one true method to it. You just want to try to chop up all the chunks and really fold it all in to combine it well. So I'll do this for like another minute or so. Okay, so this is about what it should look like once you've really gotten it in there good. Now, we are going to add the sour cream mixture, which if you look, see how much it poofed up. So that's why you need to make sure you have a bowl that is big enough for it to poof. We're gonna add the sour cream, our egg, and our salt. And you don't have to do this, but I like to lightly sort of blend up the egg. Whisk the egg before mixing it in, it helps. So I just poured the egg. Now I'm going to get the salt. Oh, whoops. And the sour cream mixture. It's also nice to blend up the egg before because then you don't have to worry about cracking the egg over and then washing your hands if you already have the egg cracked in the bowl and everything, and dump it and don't have to touch the... I like to use this head when I stir. Then I just put it on like the medium and let it mix for a while. Okay, so now I have my dough. I'll show you what it looks like. Now, if yours looks really crumbly, I wouldn't be worried. Sometimes when I make the dough, it's super flaky and I kind of will squish it together with my hands. But they always turn out really well. Sometimes it's just flakier than other times. I think it probably has something to do with how soft the butter was before I put it in. So don't be alarmed if it looks a little flakier than this. Now what I'm going to do is take about half of this out because I'm making chocolate chip and blueberry. I want to combine in the blueberries. Now the blender kind of smushes the blueberry, so make sure you put it on a really low speed, and I just have it mix it for a really short period of time, and then after that I basically just knead it with my hands. So make sure you're washing your hands periodically throughout this. There, I just did a super quick little spin. It's okay if it smushes some of them because it gets a flavor. You just don't want all the blueberries really smushed. And then we'll add in the rest of the blueberries when we're actually slicing up our scones. Because these obviously don't smash as easily as the blueberries. You can be firmer with mixing it in. This is probably only like 40% of my dough. I like the blueberry better, so I made more blueberry scones. You can make them in mini sizes or big scones. I kind of like the mini better. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay out little flat pies and then we slice them and put them in the oven. So that's what we're gonna do next. Normally what I do is I put this on wax paper and then I switch it over to the baking pan, but we did not have wax paper, so I'm just gonna do it straight on the pan. I literally just use my hand to smush it down. You want it to be like about a ½ inch thick, but really just eyeball it. You don't want your scones too fat, but you also don't want them to be like muffins. And try to make it even all the way across because then it will just make it easier for you to bake a really good batch and not have some that are underdone and some that are overdone. So I like to use a pizza slicer to do this, but you don't need one. Also, this is the time where if you notice that you didn't mix in some of the toppings in certain areas, you can just simply squish them in. I actually got a lot of chocolate chips in this, so I won't need to, but for my blueberries, I probably will. So now we just begin the slicing. I think I'm gonna make them as mini scones because it makes good snacks. And there. So now I just need to spread them all out and this pan will be good to go in the oven. One thing I forgot to mention was the temperature of the oven. You want it to be at 350. So I would just set it before you start baking and it will give the oven plenty of time to heat up before you need to use it. All right, so we're gonna slip these in the oven. Now, I don't really remember the set time that I bake these for. Normally I put them in for 12 to 15 minutes and just check them. You really just want them to be kind of lightly golden brown on the top. It's pretty easy to tell. So I'll let you guys know once they're done baking how long I put them in and also show you what it looks like when they're done. So that's my first batch of blueberry, and now I just have one more that I'll put in when these are done. Okay, we'll let these cool. They're not super gold on the top, but you can see on the edges, and if you lift them, you can see the bottoms are pretty done, so we don't want them to get too much darker underneath. So these will be perfect. So this is the final product. I still have one more batch of the blueberry to make. You can see for the blueberry, some parts where blueberries were sort of squished and it turns out perfectly fine, so don't be worried if it gets a little messy. I baked these for about 20 minutes on 350, but make sure you keep an eye on them. I put them in for about 15 minutes initially because it also depends how big you slice up your scones. Thanks for watching me and Jake's quarantine scone video. Text me if you have any questions. I'll have Jake put the recipe below too in case you want to follow the professional website that I follow.